The Discourse about the Noble Search. 1. Gathering at Rammakas' Hermitage. Thus I have heard. At one time the Gracious One was dwelling near Savatthi at Anathapindika's grounds in Jeta's wood. Then the Gracious One, having dressed in the morning time, after picking up his bowl and robe, was entering Savatthi for alms. Then many monks approached Venerable Ānanda, and after approaching they said this to Venerable Ānanda: "It has been a long time, friend Ānanda, since we heard talk about the Dhamma face to face with the Gracious One. It would be good, friend Ānanda, if we were to get to listen to talk about the Dhamma face to face with the Gracious One." "Then, Venerables, please approach the Brahmana Rammakas' hermitage. It would be well if you get to listen to talk about the Dhamma face to face with the Gracious One." "Yes, Venerable," those monks replied to Venerable Ānanda. Then the Gracious One, after walking for alms in Savatthi and returning from the alms round after the meal, addressed Venerable Ānanda, saying, "Come, Ānanda, let us approach the Eastern monastery and Megara's mother's mansion to spend the day." "Very well, Reverend Sir," Venerable Ānanda replied to the Gracious One. Then the Gracious One, together with Venerable Ānanda, approached the Eastern monastery and Megara's mother's mansion to spend the day. Then the Gracious One, having risen from seclusion in the evening time, addressed Venerable Ānanda, saying, "Come, Ānanda, let us approach the Eastern tank to bathe our limbs." "Very well, Reverend Sir," Venerable Ānanda replied to the Gracious One. Then the Gracious One, together with Venerable Ānanda, approached the Eastern tank to bathe his limbs. After bathing and withdrawing his limbs from the Eastern tank, he stood in one robe drying his limbs. Then Venerable Ānanda said this to the Gracious One: "This Brahmana Rammakas' hermitage is not far, Reverend Sir. The Brahmana Rammakas' hermitage is delightful, Reverend Sir. The Brahmana Rammakas' hermitage is pleasing, Reverend Sir. It would be good, Reverend Sir, if the Gracious One would approach the Brahmana Rammakas' hermitage, taking compassion on us." The Gracious One consented by maintaining silence. Then the Gracious One approached the Brahmana Rammakas' hermitage. Then at that time a great many monks were assembled in the Brahmana Rammakas' hermitage to hear talk on the Dhamma. Then the Gracious One stood outside the doorway waiting for the end of the conversation. Then, understanding that the conversation had finished, after coughing, he knocked the latch. Those monks opened the door for the Gracious One. Then the Gracious One, having entered the Brahmana Rammakas' hermitage, sat down on the prepared seat. While sitting, the Gracious One addressed the monks, saying, "What is the talk about, monks, amongst those who have assembled together at present? And what is the talk amongst you that was left unfinished?" "The talk about Dhamma, Reverend Sir, was in reference to the Gracious One, and then the Gracious One arrived." "It is good, monks. This is certainly suitable, monks, for you sons of good family, who through faith have gone forth from the home to homelessness. You should assemble to talk about Dhamma. When you have assembled together, monks, there are two things you ought to do: talk about the Dhamma or maintain noble silence."